Welcome to the worst nightmare of all. Reality.
Explore the lesser-known stories of our unknown world. Join the pursuit of the paranormal with Ash and Greg.
Hello, Ash.
Hello, Greg. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm really looking forward to our conversation with our guest today. Tonight. And we've already started off with some high strangeness with microphones, cameras not working. So this could be a sign of things to come. So we're fortunate enough to speak to somebody who we've spoken to a couple of times before. And when we first spoke to him, and the second time actually, he was discussing about a book that he had in the works and was writing a book. And this was some time ago now. And we're fortunate enough that we are joined by him today to not only discuss his personal experiences since we last met, but also his book. So he's published his book, and big welcome to Michael Kameron. How are you doing, Michael?
Hi, Ash. Hi, Greg. I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for having me on your show again.
No, it's always a pleasure. Yeah, you're like one of our most frequent guests, I think, apart from some of the round table people. I think you're our most frequent guest, so welcome back. It's really nice to see you and speak to you again.
Thank you, guys.
We've had some really good chats the last couple of times, so interested to now speak to you about everything that's happened since we last spoke. So we spoke to you about over a year ago now, must have been.
I think it was longer than that.
Was it?
I think so. Yeah, it was, yeah.
Sorry we haven't had you on sooner, but we did want to wait until you'd written your book. And you've now released over the last week, released your book, which is High Strangeness, A Lifetime of Alien and Paranormal Encounters. Flying Disc Press, which is through Philip Mantle. You got your forward by Paul Sinclair.
I have.
So that's really cool. So when we spoke to you, you were going to document a lot of stuff that had been happening to you.
Yeah.
So could you, if you can, could you give us sort of a brief update of where you'd got to before you started writing the book? So a very whistle-stop tour of your life that we had spoken about, and then how you come about starting to write the book.
Yeah, well, the book comprises of different aspects of, the high strangeness phenomena, from the paranormal to, UFOs or UAPs, as we now know them to be called, and alien abduction. It also speaks about, moving into when I started to investigate and research it to try to understand why it was happening. Not realizing at the time when it was happening to me in my childhood home in London that it actually started to move with me. I didn't understand it would move around with me, this type of phenomenon, which was not always a good thing. And it also, it talks about, I discuss in the book, I briefly discussed in this book complex PTSD. Last year I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, which is multiple abuse basically over a period of time, and which has not been resolved, but just stays below the surface and plays and acts out, and it's something I want to get into much more deeper and discuss on podcasts, which I've been doing recently in America, about the mental impact on this type of phenomena on people, not just as an abductee, but cryptozoology, people that experience and have experienced paranormal phenomena throughout their lives, and and the impact it can have on them. That this is a big thing, I think, and now we're looking at disclosure. partly parts of disclosure, and I think that part of it as well, for the impact it has on the mental health, is something that should be addressed much more, on podcasts and spoken about more openly, to help people. So I've been asked to go and speak on the UAP medical for the MUFON by Jesse Peake, and I'm open. The writing of the book as well will encourage people to speak about that more, because it's a huge thing really, and it's something that's not addressed. In my book I discussed that. When we talk about PTSD and we talk about complex PTSD, you have a whole list of different types of abuse and stuff like that impacts people. But this type of stuff in the strangeness field is obviously not recognised by the NHS. But it's over the last year I've been pushing that forward through the NHS for this to be recognised. And although it's quite, the medical profession are not so much trusted when it comes to this type of stuff. But I'm trying to make it more, get it out there, transparent, and for these people to address it. But this is something that I'm pushing forward now.
Definitely. That's something that we do. We spoke to a lot of people that, if like you say, they have these experiences, they have trauma and PTSD as a result, and not only do they have nowhere they can really go to professionally, they also obviously have the whole stigma and not being able to talk to anybody about it, let alone anyone professional. So, what do you think needs to happen? It's going to take a long time for, like, say, the NHS and things like that to accept it. What can people do, or what do you think needs to happen to help people like you that have had these experiences?
Well, I've discussed it recently on the podcast that I did, and we're going to, between me and the host in the United States, they're going to bring together a panel of people, within this field, to basically share their experiences, to openly discuss it, and to see what the conclusion is, what we can do within their own communities, until we can then maybe reach out and get extra help from the outside with people that are more professionally trained in dealing with that. I spoke to when I was diagnosed with complex PTSD. I was speaking to a mental health nurse, a community nurse. She and I sort of put it out there a little bit. A little bit about eye strangeness, to see, put a feeler out to see what she would think. And she said that she's had experiences with hauntings and stuff like that, and she reads, paranormal, a little bit of paranormal stuff. And then I spoke to her and I said, well, I'm an abductee, and she said, what do you mean? And I said, an alien abductee. And, there's a pause. And then she wanted me to explain more, but you often get that feeling, are they really listening to you, or is it, just a joke, or, but she did. She was listening to me, and she asked me for literature. What type of books could I read? Because I want to learn about it. And I mentioned the late John Edward Mack and the book Abduction, being that he was a professor of psychiatry. And then she purchased a copy of this, and she was reading it. So when I did see her every 2 weeks, she was asking me questions. And she said to me that she would speak to people, in the background, to try to, to see if there were any doctors that would be willing to take up the mantle, so to speak, and then try to bring together some sort of team in order to help people that have had, that are suffering from PTSD, from any type of trauma related to, this type of phenomena. As I said, not just alien abduction, but the paranormal. And see where we go from there. So this is what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I think that was one of the first things that struck me and Ash when we first spoke to you, because a lot of people don't see the video version. We don't really do a video version of this podcast, so they only get to hear you talking about your experiences. We're fortunate enough with all of our guests to actually have that face-to-face contact.
Sure.
And that was one thing that struck me and Ash when we first spoke to you, was the sort of anguish we could see on your face. Like I say anguish, but you could tell it was affecting you. And as you quite rightly point out, somebody who's got any kind of complex PTSD, especially for something where not really many people would openly say they've been through this kind of trauma, it must be a challenge for you right now anyway, just to try and get some kind of, like you say, professional assistance with what you've experienced. But for those people out there that probably would never be able to speak about it, I think it can only help them. I think, like Ash mentioned, the NHS, we're probably a little bit down the line before they even recognise anything like this.
Of course.
But it's got to start somewhere, obviously. So I do sort of congratulate you on trying to push that agenda forward. I mean, what were in your eyes? So just taking a slight step back, in your eyes, to allow us to get to the point where health professionals do take it, I say seriously, but do take it seriously. How would disclosure need to happen to a sufficient point? Because it's all well and good saying there's stuff out there in the sky, there's these objects out in the sky, and we've spoken about this on the podcast many times, that we say there's a big leap from there's some metal objects in the sky, or potentially metal objects, or whatever they are, there's something up there we can't explain. Then the other end of the spectrum in the whole sort of paranormal and UAP universe is people being taken against their will and things happening which they can't like process and explain why this is happening. So how can like the congressional stuff that's happening at the moment in disclosure, how can that help push forward your sort of movement of the complex PTSD around abductions? Sorry, that was quite a long question there.
Well, one of the things that, what I guess what a lot of abductees, I guess, are waiting for is in a similar way as to everyone in the community is waiting for, is for it to be, people are talking about it now. The whistleblowers are coming forward, they're talking about it to Congress. Mm-hmm. But it's whether the powers that be that are, whether that know about the abductions, are they willingly going to openly disclose this to the public? That needs to be, this is something I swear is on the minds of many people. Will they talk about this openly, or will they keep silent about it? I mean, we can only go forward more openly if this is discussed in such an important location in front of members of this committee. But I think if it is disclosed, I think a lot more abductees, may come forward and be given the opportunity to speak their case and to tell really people and in the world how they feel and how it's affected them. I don't think people, have been given, a platform to speak about it. It's obviously a difficult thing to speak about because, as we said before, seeing a craft in the sky or an object in the sky is one thing, but then taking it to another level and saying, actually, you know what, I've been taken from the occupants of this craft. How do you actually say that to somebody? And a lot of people, when I wrote this book, people were asking me, "Oh, Michael, you wrote a book," and I was like saying to them, "Yeah," and they were like saying, "What's it called?" And I couldn't bring myself to speak about the abduction stuff. I spoke about the paranormal. I spoke about spirituality, which is in the book, but I couldn't open up. I felt almost like a panic attack, not wondering how they would take me. And that's one of the things I think a lot of abductees have. It's difficult. I mean, we're speaking on podcasts, but in a way, we're speaking to a community of people that are, familiar with this. I mean, the everyday person outside of our circles, they probably think we're potty. even though there is evidence, and this, you got all this going on in the United States at the moment, and I think some of them don't even care really, because it's not. They're looking at what will it do for us, what it will do for them. They don't understand. I don't think the bigger picture and what's involved in all of this. Like seeing a UFO or a UAP. A lot of people shrug their shoulders to say what, but within our communities, we've been fighting, for so long to have it openly discussed by, members of the government in this fashion. And for us, it is important. Every single person in our communities know how important this is, not just for now, but for the future. But and I think more and more professionals, though, will recognise this. Though, if it's openly discussed in such a location, in front of Congress, and you've got people in high-profile positions, professional people, military personnel, talking openly about it, it will encourage, I think, medical healthcare, people to come forward and to say, how can we help? But in the meantime, I think it's just going to be met, if it isn't addressed, with skepticism still. And then if that's the case, then we have to, we can only try and do as much in our own communities to help each other and support each other, to make sure that we're okay, all of us.
Well said. And you mentioned at the top of the show about you've been invited to talk at the UAP Medical Coalition.
Yeah.
With I think Jesse Peake, who runs that. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that and what that is and the work that they're doing?
Well, I was contacted by Jesse Peake from MUFON, and I think it's his partner Debs who's involved with it. And it's got a panel of professional people that have been involved in the healthcare profession. I believe there's also a member on the panel that is a captain. He was a captain in the American Army, I think he said. So it's got a group of different people with different skill sets, and some of them have been involved with experiences, trying to help them. And I think what they're trying to do is what we're trying to do in the UK. Really, is to create a group of people that can reach out and support people in the communities that have been struggling. That's a step forward. But I think this is what we need to do in the UK. And as I say a lot of the time on the podcasts, there's nothing in the UK for us, for any of us that have these, for abductees. As I said, we talk about things, but there's nothing really set in place. We don't have support groups in the UK now, and the ones that we did have, I mean, I might be wrong. You guys might know of one that I don't know of, but in the older days, we used to have. There were a few support groups about that run by volunteers, but obviously, with their own jobs and home life and so much, in general, these began to fold. But I think this is something as well that we need to try to create in the UK, because in the United States there's a lot more going on there than there is in the UK. This is what I try to encourage on the podcasts, for it to be, for us to get together and create something much wider, bigger, and more meaningful within our community.
So, have you spoken with Dr. Daniel Stubbins?
I have had communication with the good doctor.
And obviously, you've been doing a study about with experiences and sort of the psychological effect and how we can basically help in the future. So yes, how's that gone talking to him?
And he's actually going to be speaking, isn't he, Ash, at the Manchester?
Yes, our Minicon.
Yeah. I looked it up and I saw the good doctor speaking. As I call him the good doctor. but I have communicated with him, in the past when he started his study in Cardiff University, I believe. He was looking for volunteers. But when I contacted him, it was through Hollywood, Ollie Anwood, and also Sasha Christie spoke to me about him. And I did say to Sasha that I had actually contacted him. And then we had a series of communication through emails. But at the time, he had already filled up his, quota of the people that he needed. And so we did have a little discussion about it. But I think that's a good step forward to have somebody, a professional person like him. And he does remind me a little bit of John Mack from that perspective, because I think you'll find, I think he did say that he himself had been dissuaded to go forward with this because of his pressure from the peers and, a little bit of a subtle warning to him. But, fair play to him. He's ignored that and carrying on with this. And I think that's, that shows a brave man.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know you tried for quite a while to get the funding and for this, and that last year, he finally got that funding. But I'm looking forward to his talk, seeing the results of his study, and that
will be amazing talk. That definitely will be an amazing talk. I mean, he did say that about the funding. He had to, I think he had to do it in one way in order to then get the funding. I'm not sure what way he was going to do it, but I know that's going to be an interesting talk.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. And that is UFO Identified Minicon, Sunday the 15th of October. Very few limited tickets
be there
remaining.
Or be square.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll be selling merch. That's where you need to be coming.
I've subscribed now, Ash, to it, to your site, and hopefully at some point get there myself and get to meet you all.
Yeah, definitely.
You can sign your book then for me.
Definitely.
I'll be rushing over to you both and say, "Come on, guys, sign the book."
So, talking about obviously people having these experiences and not being support, what advice would you have for someone who's listening who's maybe never spoken about their experiences, and how do you think they can get some support?
Well, they can come forward and talk to people like ourselves, that have had these experiences. And, I've tried to encourage people through reading the books, reading my book, and anyone else has had these experiences is a good point of reference to reach out to. And also, I'd say to contact the good doctor as well, people like this. I'm pretty sure he would do, be open to listen to you and go forward from there. There's a lot more work we need to do though, in order for this. I often say though, how many people are not still stepping forward to talk about this stuff? There's probably a lot of people out there, in the UK, in the United States, across the world, that have still not even had the courage to come forward yet. Still they've not felt safe in doing so, especially if they've suffered a lot of ridicule. And I think a lot of us have, how many of us in our own circles that we know have suffered from ridicule from, members of your own family, members of your friends, and it's, that's a big thing as well, because that can, cause problems as well. Maybe not.
If you have
not so much trauma, but it's not necessarily a nice thing either.
I think if you haven't got the backing of friends and family as well, I think that is an important part, because then you start to put in place like a support structure. Because like you say, and like we've mentioned, there is a big leap from lights in the sky and objects in the sky to, okay, I haven't just seen that, but this has also happened to me, and this has happened to me on more than one occasion. We've spoken to some other people, and like they won't even talk about what happened to them during their abduction case because it is so bad. So that's somebody in this community and has been in this community for a long time, written multiple books, talks all the time, and even he's just like, and I get that. I do get that there's some things that never need to be shared. I get that, but to be able to get to a place where there's an environment, a safe place for you, plus anybody else who's experienced this kind of trauma through an abduction or anything through the paranormal. Some people are highly impacted by paranormal events that happen to them. And I know
Sure.
yourself, you've been party to poltergeist and paranormal activity growing up. So there does need to be some kind of support mechanism for you, and currently, and I don't even know how disclosure even gets us closer, because it's still seen as like a fringe part of the UFO or UAP community.
Yeah, well,
Because I mean, at what point does the US government, they say, yeah, we've got the lights in the sky, we don't know what they are. We've got retrieval of crashed craft with non-human biologics in it, of which we still don't know what they are.
Yeah.
But to go from that to say, you know what, along with all this high strangeness that's going on at the moment, these entities or whatever they are will come down at will. We can't stop them, see them, or whatever. They will take people against their will. Things happen that nobody would in a million years want to experience, and there's nothing we can do about it. And those people haven't even got a voice. So I think even disclosures, not even that scratching the surface on the kind of assistance that you and other experiencers will need. So for you to be pushing that with the NHS and this coalition in America with Jesse Peak, I think that's got to be a good start. And more people, if they can feel brave enough to even just take that first step. I remember we spoke to you the first time, and that was one of the first times you sort of said anything to anybody sort of publicly.
Yeah.
And we still reference that initial conversation with you, although we don't mention you by name, but we on podcasts we do highlight the fact that people do come to us with accounts that they've never really been able to share before. And like you say, this community is, you've got like-minded people in the community, so you can say stuff on a podcast or multiple podcasts, and people like me and Ash we'll listen to you, we'll ask you questions, and we'll see, sort of try and help what we can. But if you were to just go straight to the Daily Mirror or straight on This Morning, the X-Files music would come on for a start.
They'd rip you apart.
They would. And it's a sad state of affairs that somebody can't tell their story without this light, this beam of joke being shone over the whole thing.
But that's the trouble, though, with the media still today. You know, I'm not sure if there's any. I mean, I was approached by the Daily Star to do a talk because of disclosure, you know. And they say, you know, I'm an investigative researcher and I'm connected with various papers. Then mentioned at the bottom of the list, the Daily Star. Would you be interested in doing an interview? And I respectively declined on the basis that I don't want to be made a mockery of, and I don't want our field of study to be pushed down into, you know, basically, you know, ridicule. You know, I want them to see that what we do in this community, it's not just a hobby. It's not just, you know, it's a serious business, and we're all trying to get the truth out there. And so, you know, I didn't want him to be obviously tell my story. Then when it's, you know, shown in the newspaper, everything I've said is changed. And then it's basically like you said, Greg, you know, you got about the X-Files, it's ridiculed, you know, but just to sell the newspapers, you know. But they need to understand, though, that the people that are involved, like yourselves, in this phenomena, you know, it's not a joke. It will have a huge impact at some point in the future of this world. And probably it's the most important topic to date in this world, because of the because of the secrecy that surrounded it for for literally decades. If there was nothing in it, why have you hidden it for so long? So I declined, and he said, "Okay, then, thanks." So, and I mean, in my book, I do say that in my book, because John Edward Mack himself quoted about this and said that the newspapers and the media basically make a joke out of it, and they were more interested in selling their rag newspapers than actually presenting the truth and getting the truth out to to the public, to the world. Surely that would be the biggest story ever, instead of like dragging us down and ridiculing us just to sell their toilet paper newspaper. So anyway, I said no to that. I stuck with my integrity and said no.
Good.
So
There's a lot of sold their soul to the devil for a fast buck, I'll tell you.
yeah, well, you know what though, it's if we start to do that, then they're not going to take us seriously, are they? We need to show them that we mean business.
For sure.
I felt good saying that, eh?
And you mentioned there Greg mentioned a lot about the support network and stuff that kind of experiences need. Definitely. And it's important because when people do come forward, and to make no bones about it, like it's very, very high probability that you will get abuse, you will get the comments, you will get people coming at you. Even within some sections of the UFO community, seem to attack each other for some reason, and that will happen regardless of who you are. So it's important that you have that support network in place, otherwise you're going to get eaten alive.
I mean, to be honest with you, though, Ash, I'm not really bothered about so much about what people think in the community. You've had these experiences, and that's all you can say. But what I will say is that some experiences that you have are really difficult to prove. There's no, like as I say, Dr. J. Einik, when he said about close encounters of the second kind with trace evidence. It's difficult. When you're having abductions or anything else, it's difficult to prove that, because there's nothing there. You can go into a landing site and maybe test the ground, or for traces of radiation, or you maybe have somebody who's got implants, and you may be able to take these, remove them, and put them under a microscope, so to speak. And I'm just putting that in a very simple layman's terms, because it's much more complicated than that. And you have something to look at, something to analyze. But in other aspects of this phenomena, you haven't got nothing. So this is when you can you can get the ridicule on that, and and that's a fair point as well. There's nothing you can do about that. It's just an opinion. But we do have these experiences, and but this is where with the disclosure would help. If they come out and said, this is happening, that would back it up a little bit more, because then they would have files on it, wouldn't they? Case files that then can be presented to the public, and that's a really good point.
So in the past year, you said you got a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah.
With complicated PTSD. So how has that sort of changed how you look back on your life and your experiences? Has it changed the way that you look back on it?
Well, it certainly helps. Like you were saying, Greg. It's to do with having somebody basically to soundboard. To talk about this. Your own little counsellor in a way. Although, having said that, it helps more if that person is familiar with the subject, rather than not so much familiar with it. But it's writing my book was very therapeutic, because you were going through and reliving it again. There was a lot of tears actually, and stuff happening when I was writing the book. So because you're writing every chapter, you're going through the different drafts, and you're working through it. You're working through those emotions, and some of it you're looking back at from your childhood, that's still sort of that you've kept hidden, that you've kept in the background. But writing the book did help me to to release a lot of that pain that I experienced, because what you got to think about the book, really, most of the book is, and the trauma related to my experiences are from my childhood. So the trauma that I have now is the trauma from the child, because during them times in the 1970s, and growing up in a strict Roman Catholic family environment, there was no one you could talk to. Even as I went forward, as a teenager, as a young man, there was still no one around. The phenomenon as it is today, it's much more, especially with now we got the internet, social media. We're able to spread the word more. We're able to meet other like-minded people that have had these experiences. In a wider field of the phenomena. And so that helps as well. I mean, but the therapy I have is talking therapy, so it's just where, I can go there every 2 weeks and discuss anything that's happening to me, can go back to my childhood and talk about that. And, the therapist that I talk to, she's interested in my book. She wants to read more about the phenomena, and understand it. So writing the book, it is very when you write any book, it's difficult, as you know. But writing one that's more personal to yourself and going back and pulling out aspects of this pain that you've experienced decades ago, it is painful, but at the same point, you are releasing. I learned from people in my family to forgive them and to forgive parts of myself. So it does help to do that, to write it all out, and with the different drafts that you did. So, it's almost like you're getting rid of a lot of the negative and keeping a lot of the positive, and using the positive and actually to help other people within this, within high strangeness.
Do you feel like you've been unburdened by all the negative stuff since you've put it on paper?
Yeah, I guess
you
so.
look like you have. You look, from what I remember when we first spoke, you had a real kind of pained look on you, like a really stressed, and I mean it in the nicest way. You did look like you had anguish. You really
I did.
And
Yeah,
now
you're right. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You do look. You've got a lot more colour in you. Maybe that's just the light, but but you do feel and sound more upbeat about the experience, and the fact that you're now talking about it and you've spoken to all these other podcasts. I think that's testament to the fact that sometimes it's good to offload, and if offloading is just talking about it to random strangers on the internet, like technically we are, it can be a positive, or have a positive impact on your trauma. I'm not saying that works for everybody. It might not work for you to that extent, but you do definitely look less burdened by the anguish that you suffered. And if anybody wants to know exactly what we're on about, we've got the 2 other episodes that we've spoken to Michael, which we go into a lot of detail and some dark places at times. There was some dark places and the conversations went quite dark. Where you can hear Michael's story, which will be sort of almost wrapped up in a book, I'm assuming, as well. So.
Yeah, you're not wrong, Greg. You're right. I mean, when I did your first 2, there was a lot of this, this pain inside of me, and but as I said, writing the book did help me a lot. When I write book 2, which is the follow-on from this volume, there is a lot of dark stuff in that, which I will be writing about. And as I said to you, there will be a trigger warning on the book, because of the content which will be, which I will talk about. And again, this comes under the experiences I had. Some of them were quite terrifying. That led, at the time I didn't realize back then I was experiencing PTSD. I never understood that back then. And I guess even when I spoke to you guys the first and second time, it wasn't, I never even sort of considered it at that time. But it was obviously underlining in my mindset, and affecting me in other ways. So one of my goals within the phenomena as well is to reach out and to help other people, and to encourage people to come forward, and so that they can start to heal, if it's in small baby steps. It's a start, a beginning, and that's all that's required, really. But it did help me writing the book.
You mentioned obviously talking to a therapist about
Yeah.
this, which is great. I know that therapists can't talk about other patients and stuff like that, but as this particular therapist mentioned anything about having any other patients with similar experiences or not?
No, she's not. Well, the thing is, right, she's actually a mental health nurse in the community, and she works with the GP surgery. So I was having the seasons in there in the surgery, but I asked her if my GP would be given details of her talks, and she said not if you don't want to. And I asked her not to share my experiences with my GP because he was actually a military doctor at one time, and I guess you worry a little bit what they're going to think, because that's your surgery. So, and she told me that she wouldn't pass that on to anyone, but she did. I did ask her that actually, Ash, if she'd come across anyone, and she said not at this moment in time, but you never know. But maybe he will help her, help them, by me being the first in some way, and because I was given a reference, points to go to and to look up on the, on YouTube and various literature. And, she was what I found interesting with her, she was very open about it. She wasn't, I didn't see any sarcasm or anything like that. She was listening to me. She was, asking me lots of questions. I was giving her lots of information, lots of feedback. And she just wanted to know really how this impacted my life. And I guess, by doing that type of research herself, it can only benefit her in helping other people that are having these experiences. And I think, and I said to her, there might be other people that are your colleagues that could well be having these experiences, but just not talking about them. Because of, a bit like the good doctor. Because of peerage, because of peers, you might be ridiculed. You might, because they're in high-profile jobs. I'm pretty sure you guys have come across many people in your interviews that are in professional jobs. Perhaps, and we'll only discuss it with you guys or within these circles, but not outside of their own professionalism. Which is difficult as well.
Yeah, for sure. We've had people, and with me as well, saying don't mention my profession, don't put in my name and stuff. Like if you know where I live and what my job is, people might be able to identify me. So if it's like quite a unique job and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very real issue. Understandably, it still is.
I mean, I'd be well surprised. I'd be well surprised, Ash, if there isn't anyone in the medical professions that have not had these experiences. There's got to be loads of them, and they're just not talking. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of the UFO whistleblowers now, what are they doing? They're coming onto podcasts. They're talking to people like us, and they're not going to their own organisations. They're coming to us. They're coming to people like yourselves to speak about these experiences they're having, because their own military command are basically telling them to either shut up about it or it doesn't exist. When they know they know themselves by seeing it with their own eyes that it exists. And so where are they going to go with it? Well, to what the media can consider to be the fringe. So it says a lot.
Definitely. So have your experiences continued since we last spoke? Is it still an ongoing?
It's ongoing, but not as much. There's there are happenings here and there, but nothing as it was. Not it wasn't as bad as it was. It's calmed down a bit, but I do have the odd paranormal experiences, like a lot of people do. And a lot of the time, last night I did have something which was, again, it's broken up, which was more than coming into remembering it as a dream, really, which is, being in an underground base among other abductees. But the only thing I would say is, I've been discussing this with a few people today, is that I was among abductees, and there was a girl, a young woman that was brought into the room with me, and I immediately recognized her as someone that I've seen before here now. But I can't remember any more than that. But it's just, again, it's broken up, it's fragmented. But, it is what it is. That's all it is. It was just that. For me at the moment, what I'm experiencing is just as I was saying about the, flashbacks, panic attacks, and things like this, of this nature, really, at the moment. That and it's, I seem to have, I do seem to have things happen to me after spoken on podcasts, So, who knows? But the only beneficial thing I can say to that is, if you're a writer, you can jot it down into a journal and make something positive of it by creating a narrative and putting it in a book. That's the best way to channel it, I think.
So you mentioned that things have sort of calmed down a little bit, which is obviously great, and that you're starting to experience some paranormal stuff. Right at the start, you were experiencing paranormal stuff, and I just wondered, is the sort of level of stuff happening now, is it on a level as to what it was before all this stuff happened when you were little, or is it, what can you explain what sort of stuff's happening now?
Yeah, just feelings, or feeling entities around you, shadows from the peripheral vision. It's just, it's not as strong as it was. It's just there, you just notice certain shadows moving around in your location. I did have, where I am at the moment, where I'm living at the moment, temporarily, I'm on a farm in the southwest of England. Literally, if I look out my window now, it's pitch black. You can't see your hand or anything. It's that, but I was mentioning to somebody on here, one of the cryptozoologists, basically, that I was outside here where I am now, and I was on the phone to somebody talking. It's pitch black, and then on the lane itself, I saw something standing there, which was like literally, some sort of creature. I don't know what it was. It was just a figure of it. I could see the figure of it, and it was blacker and black. It was blacker than black. All I can say it was black. So it's black out there, but it was darker than the actual night. But when I was looking at it, it didn't have no. And I was saying to my friend on the phone that there's something in front of me, literally on the lane going out of the farm, and it's just standing there, just and it didn't have eyes, so there was nothing glowing eyes on it. It was just a dark figure, and I have no idea what it was. And so, because I actually, at the time, and as I said to him, at the time, you don't think about it. I didn't take a picture, which pissed me off, because I was annoyed about that, because you should always take a picture, should you? But you're not in that frame of mind sometimes, I could have got off the phone and said to him, I've got to go now, and then, quickly take a picture with your hand shaking. But I also did was I went back inside and I put the spotlights on from the house, and I went out literally within the grounds, and I just couldn't see anything. But then about a month later, in the same spot, I was again talking on the phone, because you can't get a good reception here unless you go outside into where the farm equipment is kept. And I was standing there talking, and all of a sudden I had a blue orb, literally like the size of I would say a small, not a small ball, but a small little football size, and it had like a plasma towel upon it, on it. And as it went past me, it just was shot past me. It was silent, and it was quite bright. And I was like saying to my friend, "Oh, there's a blue orb that's just gone past me." and then it just, when I looked, I couldn't see where it had gone. I don't know if it just, vanished, or it just took off so fast I couldn't see it. And so I had that happen to me. But the property where I am, it's on the ley line, is it the Michael line, going through to Glastonbury. So I don't know if that's connected in any way. I don't know if you guys are familiar with anything like that. It's not really my field, but so there is just, not far away here, just in front, just a few clicks in front when you go outside there's actually a forest there that's been around quite a long time. So I'm trying to find out if there's any history to that and anything associated with that. And there's another guy in the cryptozoology community that's actually trying to do some research to see if there is any paranormal experiences. I've spoken to a few people that are, in the farming community, but they're really difficult to get information out of. It's like blood out of a stone. They won't tell you nothing, but they do say that they see, the black cats and everything, which are quite common now to Somerset, to this area. And I tried to say to them, because they're quite old school, a lot of them. And I say, "Oh, so do you see anything unusual?" And they say, "What do you mean unusual?" And I said, "Well, lights in the sky, lights in the sky, or shadowy figures in the forest." And they don't say nothing to you. So I'm still trying to work at it, try to chip away at them.
Good luck with that.
But yeah. So, but I'm pretty sure they got some good stories. It's just trying to get it out of them. I might have to offer them, go down to the pub and get them a cider.
Definitely.
That might do it.
So, your book, High Strangeness, A Lifetime of Alien and Paranormal Encounters, you want to give us a brief overview of the type of things that were included in your book throughout? So
it took
period of life it covers, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it talks about a brief history of the location of my childhood home, which is, when I was doing writing the book, I found out a few things about the location which was quite interesting throughout history, which may have a bearing on why there was paranormal activity in the house, poltergeist activity. And it talks about the immediate, because the book is focusing primarily on my childhood home, which was a schoolhouse situated inside the grounds of a junior school, which still exists to this day, which was owned by the church, basically. And it talks about the paranormal activity, poltergeist, and disembodied voices, entities moving around the house. It talks about the sighting of what would be considered, Spring Hill Jack. I don't know if you've heard of that type of, and so that there is something I had as a child with this particular, whether it was a man or, some sort of entity, I don't know, but there is an experience there when I was a child with this particular figure or character. It goes in talking about the sighting of a craft with my brother Sean at the time. So the book itself, it sort of goes through a theme of, the paranormal into the UFO sighting, into the MIBs, the Men in Black, and it begins to, I had an experience which wasn't a near-death experience, but I had when my dad passed. So I speak about my dad passing, my relationship with my family, but mostly my dad, and the difficult experiences with him, and I talk about a time when he passes, and I have a sighting of him, and then just after that, I have an experience where I'm able to have a meeting with him, a face-to-face contact with him, basically outside the body. But I do stress it's not a near-death experience. It's different. It's not an NDE, but it's similar because there is a rainbow type tunnel involved, which is often recognized in the NDE phenomena. But then it talks about my then trying to understand this type of phenomena. What's happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Is there other people that have this? And if not, why is it me? Why have I been singled out for some, reason. And again, I like to stress, because people do say this to me. Somebody said this to me. Oh, Michael, you're special or you're chosen. I want to emphasize and stress. No, I'm not. I'm not special. I'm not chosen. I don't believe that I'm any of those things, because that's important to know. Because this is not a laughing matter. That these are real people that are involved in this phenomena, and some of the experiences they have, they shouldn't be having. They should be having nice experiences. They should. I mean, to be fair, people do have the good experiences, though. So it's all not negative. And I do show this in my book as well, that I've had good experiences as well, but not necessarily in the abduction, but more when, as I go through my life, I begin to open up spiritually, and experience spiritual experiences that are positive, that are good. So the book is a bit of a balance. And as I go into book 2, there are darker stuff. There is a dark theme to it, but again, it begins to move out into more of the much more positive, and that has to be stressed as well. Although we do have these experiences, and they can be dark and they can be frightening, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that's what we should be pushing for, because it's the dark stuff that tries to keep us, in a certain place. And what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do with that, is when we, show people as well, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. We can take positives from the negatives, and transform them. And my emphasis on that is to always to help other people, and to recognize this. And when I was growing up, as we said before, there wasn't, for many people, there was no safe place for them to go. There was no one you could talk to, and that's a scary thing, and it's a dangerous place to be in some time, for some people. But now we can move forward a little bit more with this, and move into a much more positive theme.
Amazing. So that's High Strangeness, A Lifetime of Alien and Paranormal Encounters by Michael Kameron, available on Amazon.co.uk or Amazon.com, in paperback, hardback, on Kindle Limited, and even on audio, if that's takes your fancy, you like to listen rather than read. It's available in there. So thank you very much. We'll also put the link below.
Thanks, Ash. Thank you.
Click on there to buy it. Thank you again for third time being on the show.
Third time, a hat trick. Right?
Yeah.
Congrats with the book. We sure
Thanks, Ash.
With this one and with the second one coming up.
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. We feel your pain on writing a book, so we're there with you on that journey.
Pursuit of the Paranormal with Ash and Greg.